Alina Martinez never thought she would be the type of woman who ran away from love. But here she was, at 28 years old, doing exactly that. Every time someone mentioned the word marriage, she felt her chest tighten and her palms get sweaty. It wasn't that she hated the idea of love itself. She just couldn't understand why everyone thought she needed to share her life with someone else to be happy. Living in the small coastal town of Pine Harbor, Alina had built what she thought was the perfect life. Veterinary clinic sat just 3 blocks from the ocean. She could hear the waves crashing against the shore every morning when she opened her windows. The smell of salt air mixed with the sound of seagulls made her feel peaceful in a way that nothing else could. Most mornings, Alina would wake up at 6, make herself a cup of coffee, and walk through her small apartment, where she wanted it. Her books were arranged by color on the shelves. Her kitchen was spotless, with every pot and pan in its proper place. Her bed was made with crisp white sheets that nobody else had slept in. This was her space, her sanctuary, and she loved every inch of it. The veterinary clinic had become her second home. Over the past 5 years, Alina knew every corner of the building. From the squeaky third step on the stairs to the way the morning sunlight hit the examination room windows, she had painted the walls herself in calming blues and greens, colors that seemed to help nervous animals relax. The waiting room smelled like lavender because she kept fresh flowers there every week. Alina found peace in her work that she had never found with people. Animals were honest. When a dog was scared, it trembled. When a cat was angry, it hissed. When a horse was in pain, it showed her exactly where it hurt. There were no games, no hidden meanings, no complicated emotions to figure out. Just simple, direct communication that made sense to her. But people were different. They said one thing and meant another. They promised forever and left after 6 months. They talked about love, but seemed to want to change everything about her. Alina had learned this lesson the hard way through a string of relationships that all ended the same way, with her feeling like she wasn't good enough just as she was. There was Miguel, who had wanted her to quit working late nights at the clinic. "Why do you care more about animals than spending time with me?" he would ask. Then came Robert, who thought her small apartment was too plain and kept bringing furniture she never asked for. And don't even get her started on Thomas, who had actually suggested she might want to consider a more social career, since being a veterinarian was kind of lonely work. Each relationship had chipped away at her confidence until she finally decided she was better off alone, at least when she was by herself. Nobody criticized her choices or tried to make her into someone she wasn't. The pressure got worse when her grandmother, Rosa, started her weekly phone calls about marriage. Rosa had been married to Elena's grandfather for 43 years before he passed away. She couldn't understand why her granddaughter wasn't following the same path. Mia Rosa would say in her gentle but persistent voice, "You're getting older. Don't you want a family? Don't you want someone to take care of you?" Alina would always give the same answer. "I can take care of myself, Grandma. I don't need a man to complete me." But Rosa never seemed satisfied with this response. She would send Alina photos from weddings she attended, tell her about the nice young men she met at church, and ask when Alina was going to bring someone home for Sunday dinner. Each conversation left Alina feeling more defensive about her choices. The worst part was watching her friends disappear into their relationships. Her best friend from college, Lisa, used to call every week. They would talk for hours about everything and nothing. But after Lisa got married, the calls became monthly, then every few months, then almost never. When they did talk, Lisa seemed tired and stressed, constantly apologizing for not having time to chat. Marriage changes people, Alina would tell herself as she walked along the beach in the evenings. It's not always for the better. She had seen it happen over and over again. Independent, successful women would meet someone, fall in love, and slowly start giving up pieces of themselves. They would move to different cities for their partner's job. They would change their interests to match their boyfriend's hobbies. They would even change the way they dressed or styled their hair. Alina refused to become one of those women. She had worked too hard to build her life exactly the way she wanted it. Her clinic was thriving, her finances were stable, and she had a routine that brought her joy and satisfaction. Why should she risk losing all of that for the possibility of love that might not even last? Every evening, Alina would lock up the clinic, walk the 3 blocks to her apartment, and make herself dinner while watching the sunset through her kitchen window. She would read a book, take a bath, and go to sleep in her perfectly organized bedroom. This was her life, and despite what everyone else seemed to think, she was happy with it. But sometimes, in the quiet moments just before sleep, Alina wondered if she was protecting herself from heartbreak or just hiding from the possibility of something real. She pushed those thoughts away as quickly as they came. After all, she had learned the hard way that hoping for love only led to disappointment. Tomorrow would be another day at the clinic, another day of helping animals, another day of the peaceful, predictable life she had created for herself. And that was exactly how she wanted it to stay. The rain was coming down hard that Thursday morning, turning the streets of Pine Harbor into small rivers. Alina had arrived at her clinic early, as she always did, but the weather made everything feel different. The usual morning sounds were muffled by the steady drumming of raindrops against her windows. Fewer people were walking their dogs past her building. She was organizing medical supplies in the back room when she heard the front door chime ring. Alina glanced at the clock. It was barely 7 in the morning, and she wasn't officially open yet. But she never turned away an emergency, especially when it involved an animal in need. Walking toward the front of the clinic, Alina could hear a man's voice speaking softly, almost whispering. As she rounded the corner, she stopped short. Standing in her waiting room was a soldier in muddy combat gear, holding what looked like a bundle of wet fur against his chest. His boots were leaving small puddles on her clean floor, and his uniform was soaked through from the rain. "I'm sorry," he said when he saw her. "I know you're not open yet, but I found this little guy on the side of the road near the base. I think he's hurt pretty bad." Alina's professional instincts kicked in immediately. She could see blood seeping through the towel he had wrapped around the animal, and the way he was holding it told her this wasn't just a minor injury. Without saying a word, she motioned for him to follow her to the examination room. "Put him here on the table," she said, switching on the bright overhead light. "But keep your hands on him. He's probably scared." As Alina unwrapped the towel, she revealed a small mixed-breed dog, maybe 6 months old. The poor thing had several cuts on his leg and side, probably from broken glass or metal debris. He was shivering, but whether from cold, pain, or fear, she couldn't tell. What struck Alina most was how the soldier she could see his name tag read. Chen kept one hand gently resting on the dog's head while she examined the wounds. Most people would have stepped back and let her work, but he seemed to understand that his presence was calming the frightened animal. "What's your name?" Alina asked, as she prepared to clean the wounds. "David," he replied, never taking his eyes off the dog. "David Chen. I was coming back from a training exercise when I saw him by the roadside. At first I thought he was dead, but then I saw him trying to crawl toward the trees." Alina noticed something in David's voice when he talked about finding the dog. There was a gentleness there that she hadn't expected from someone in military gear. She had treated animals brought in by soldiers before, and usually they were in a hurry to drop them off and leave. But David seemed genuinely concerned about this little creature he had rescued. "You did the right thing bringing him in," Alina said, starting to clean the cuts. "These wounds are deep, but they're not life-threatening. He's going to need stitches and antibiotics, but he should be fine." David let out a long breath that Alina realized he had been holding. "Thank God," he said. "I was so worried I was too late." As Alina worked, she found herself stealing glances at this unexpected visitor. David's hands were large and rough, clearly used to hard work, but he touched the dog with the same careful attention she used with her most delicate patience. When the dog whimpered during a particularly tender spot, David immediately started speaking to him in low, soothing tones. "It's okay, buddy," he whispered. "The doctor's going to fix you right up. You're safe now." Lena had been doing this job for years, and she had seen all kinds of people bring animals into her clinic. But something about David's behavior touched her in a way she hadn't expected. He wasn't just doing a good deed. He genuinely cared about what happened to this stray dog he had found. "Are you planning to keep him?" Alina asked, as she started stitching the largest wound. David was quiet for a moment. "I don't know," he said finally. "I mean, I'd like to, but I just got back from deployment a few weeks ago. I'm still trying to figure out civilian life again. I'm not sure I'd be a good pet parent right now." There was something in his voice when he mentioned deployment that made Alina look up from her work. She saw a tiredness in David's eyes that had nothing to do with the early morning hour or the muddy training exercise. It was the kind of exhaustion that came from seeing things no person should have to see. "Where were you deployed?" she asked gently. "Afghanistan," David replied. 15 months? It's been harder to adjust back than I thought it would be." Alina nodded, focusing on her stitching. She had heard similar stories from other veterans who brought animals to her clinic. The transition from military life to civilian life was difficult. Under the best circumstances, and she imagined it was even harder for someone who had been in combat. "Animals can be good therapy," she said carefully. "They don't ask complicated questions or expect you to be someone you're not." David smiled for the first time since he had arrived. "Sounds like you understand that feeling." Lena felt a small flutter in her stomach that she quickly pushed away. She wasn't here to make friends or connections. She was here to treat an injured animal. That was her job, nothing more. But as she finished the stitches and bandaged the dog's wounds, Alina found herself curious about David's story. What had he seen overseas? How was he adjusting to being back? And why did he seem so genuinely kind when her experience had taught her that most people had hidden motives? "He'll need to stay here for a few hours so I can monitor him," Alina said, stepping back from the examination table. "You can call this afternoon to check on him." David nodded, but he didn't move toward the door. Instead, he continued gently petting the dog, who had finally stopped shivering and seemed to be falling asleep under the warm lights. "Thank you," David said, looking directly at Alina for the first time. "Really? Thank you for taking care of him." Alina felt that flutter again, stronger this time. David's eyes were dark brown and completely sincere. She could see gratitude there, but also something else, a loneliness that she recognized because she felt it herself sometimes even, though she would never admit it out loud. "It's my job," she said, but her voice was softer than usual. "No," David replied. "Your job is treating animals." This was kindness. As David finally headed toward the door, Alina watched him go. Something about this encounter felt different from her usual emergency cases. Maybe it was the way he had cared for a stray dog he owed nothing to. Or maybe it was the vulnerability she had heard in his voice when he talked about readjusting to civilian life. Whatever it was, Lena found herself hoping he would call that afternoon to check on the dog. For the first time in years, that hope didn't scare her as much as it should have. David called that afternoon, just like Alina thought he might. His voice sounded different over the phone, less confident than it had been that morning, almost nervous. "Hi, this is David Chen," he said. "I brought in the injured dog this morning. I was wondering how he's doing." Lena looked over at the small kennel where the dog was resting. He had eaten some food and was looking much better already. "He's doing great," she said. "The stitches are holding well, and he's got quite an appetite." "That's wonderful news," David said, and Alina could hear the relief in his voice. "When can I pick him up?" Alina paused. During quiet moments throughout the day, she had found herself thinking about David and his gentle way with the injured animal. Something about him seemed different from other men she had met, though she couldn't quite put her finger on what it was. "Tomorrow morning would be fine," she said. "But I should mention, he'll need follow-up care for the next few weeks. Bandage changes, medication, things like that." "Of course," David said quickly. "Whatever he needs." When David arrived the next morning, Alina noticed he had cleaned up since yesterday. Gone were the muddy combat boots and soaked uniform. Dead, he wore simple jeans and a blue button-down shirt that made his dark eyes look even warmer. He had also brought something, a small stuffed toy shaped like a bone. "I thought he might like this," David said, looking almost embarrassed. "I don't know much about dogs, but the lady at the pet store said puppies like soft toys." Lena felt something shift inside her chest as she watched David gently place the toy near the dog's nose. The little animal immediately grabbed it with his teeth and started wagging his tail. It was such a simple gesture, but it showed a thoughtfulness that Alina rarely saw in people. "Have you thought of a name for him?" Lena asked as she prepared the dog's medication and care instructions. David smiled. "I was thinking about calling him Hope. Esperanza. Actually, that's Spanish for hope. My grandmother always said that hope was the most important thing to hold on to, no matter how dark things got. Alina looked up from the paperwork she was preparing. There was something in David's voice when he mentioned his grandmother, a softness, that made her curious about his family, his background, his story. "That's a beautiful name," she said, "and very fitting considering how you found him." As the days turned into weeks, David became a regular visitor to the clinic. At first, his visits were purely medical, bringing Esperanza in for bandage changes and checkups. But gradually, the appointments stretched longer. David would ask questions about dog care, about Elena's work, about life in Pine Harbor. Elena found herself looking forward to these visits in a way that surprised her. David had a quiet way of listening that made her feel heard when she talked. About a difficult case or a long day at work, he didn't try to offer solutions or minimize her feelings. He just listened, nodded, and occasionally asked thoughtful questions. One afternoon, David arrived during Elena's lunch break. She was sitting in the small garden behind her clinic, eating a sandwich and reading a veterinary journal. "I'm sorry," he said when he saw her. "I didn't realize you were on break. I can come back later." "It's okay," Elena said, surprising herself by patting the bench beside her. "How's Esperanza doing?" Levin sat down, leaving a respectful distance between them. "He's amazing. I can't believe how much energy he has now. Last night he chewed up one of my shoes," Elena laughed. "Welcome to dog ownership. The shoe phase is just the beginning." They sat in comfortable silence for a few minutes, watching the ocean in the distance. Elena realized this was the first time in years she had shared her lunch break with another person, and it didn't feel awkward or intrusive like she had always imagined it would. "Can I ask you something?" David said finally. Elena tensed slightly. This was usually when men started asking personal questions she didn't want to answer. "Sure. Why did you become a veterinarian?" The question caught Elena off guard. She had expected something about her personal life, her relationships, her plans for the future. Instead, David was asking about her passion, her career choice. "I've always felt more comfortable with animals than with people," Elena said honestly. "Animals are straightforward. They don't play games or hide their feelings." David nodded thoughtfully. "I understand that. After being overseas, I sometimes feel like I don't know how to talk to civilians anymore. Everyone seems so complicated, like they're saying one thing but thinking something else." Elena looked at David with new interest. She had never heard a man admit to feeling confused or overwhelmed by social interactions. Most of the men she had dated would never have shown that kind of vulnerability. "Is that why you're thinking about getting out of the military?" she asked. David was quiet for a long moment. "Partly," he said finally. "I love serving my country, but 15 months in Afghanistan changed me. I've seen things that most people can't imagine, coming home trying to pretend everything is normal. It's harder than I thought it would be." Elena felt her heart do something strange, a little flip that she hadn't experienced in years. David wasn't trying to impress her with stories of heroism or adventure. Instead, he was sharing his struggles, his uncertainty about the future. "Are you thinking about doing?" she asked gently. "I've been looking into programs that help veterans transition to civilian careers," David said. "There's one that trains people to work with other veterans who are struggling with readjustment. Kind of like counseling, but from someone who's been there." Lena could see the passion in David's eyes when he talked about helping other veterans. It reminded her of how she felt about helping animals, that sense of purpose, of making a real difference in the world. Over the following weeks, their conversations deepened. David would stop by the clinic, not just for Esperanza's care, but to chat with Elena during her breaks. He brought coffee sometimes, or fresh flowers from the farmer's market. Nothing fancy or expensive, just small, thoughtful gestures that showed he was thinking about her. What surprised Elena most was how David never pushed for more than she was willing to give. He didn't ask her on dates or pressure her to spend time with him outside of the clinic. He seemed content to build their friendship slowly, letting her set the pace. One evening, Selena was closing up the clinic she realized she had started. Looking forward to David's visits more than she cared to admit, for the first time in years, she found herself curious about someone else's life, interested in their thoughts and feelings. But this realization also scared her. Alina had spent years building walls around her heart, convincing herself that independence was safer than vulnerability. Now, without her permission, those walls were starting to develop cracks. And David, with his gentle patience and genuine kindness, was the cause. 3 months had passed since that rainy morning when David first walked into Elena's clinic. What started as simple follow-up visits for Esperanza had grown into something neither of them had expected. Elena found herself looking at the clock. Around 3 in the afternoon, knowing that was usually when David would stop by after finishing his work at the base. But today felt different. Elena was dealing with one of the hardest cases of her career, a beautiful golden retriever named Sunny, who belonged to the Johnson family. The dog had been battling cancer for months, and despite all of Elena's efforts, all the treatments and medications, Sunny was losing the fight. Mrs. Johnson sat in the examination room with tears streaming down her face while her 2 young children waited in the lobby. Lena had delivered difficult news many times before, but it never got easier. Today, she would have to tell this loving family that it was time to say goodbye to their beloved pet. "How long does she have?" Mrs. Johnson asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Elena looked at Sunny, who was lying quietly on the examination table, her breathing shallow and labored. "Maybe a few days," Elena said softly. "But she's in pain now. The kindest thing we can do is let her go peacefully." Mrs. Johnson nodded through her tears. "I know you're right. I just... I don't know how to tell my kids. Sunny has been with us since they were babies." Elena felt her own eyes filling with tears. This was the part of her job that never got easier, watching families face the loss of a beloved pet. She was so focused on comforting Mrs. Johnson that she didn't notice David had arrived and was standing quietly in the doorway. When Mrs. Johnson left to talk with her children, Lena sat alone in the examination room with Sunny, gently stroking the dog's soft fur. The weight of the decision, the sadness of the family, and the unfairness of losing such a sweet animal all hit her at once. She put her head down and let herself cry. Came David's gentle voice from behind her. "Rough day." Elena looked up, surprised to see him there. Her eyes were red from crying, and she felt embarrassed to be seen in such a vulnerable state. "I'm sorry," she said, quickly wiping her face. "I didn't know you were here." Into the room and closed the door softly behind him. "Don't apologize," he said. "What's going on?" Elena told him about Sunny, about the family who would have to say goodbye, about how helpless she felt when all her knowledge and training couldn't save an animal she had grown to love. David listened without interrupting, his presence calm and steady. David said when she finished, "In Afghanistan, we had a saying, you can't save everyone. But everyone you do save matters. It sounds like Sunny had a wonderful life because of the care you gave her. That counts for something." Elena looked at David with surprise. She had expected him to try to cheer her up or tell her everything would be okay. Instead, he acknowledged her pain while helping her see the meaning in her work. It was exactly what she needed to hear. "Thank you," she said quietly. "That actually helps." David sat down in the chair next to her. "Can I tell you something? When I was overseas, I used to think that strength meant never showing emotion, never letting anyone see you hurt. But coming back, talking to other veterans, I've learned that real strength is letting yourself feel things deeply and still choosing to keep going." Elena felt something shift inside her chest. David wasn't trying to fix her feelings or make them go away. He was honoring them, sharing his own struggles, and showing her that vulnerability could be a kind of strength. Over the next few weeks, something changed between them. Elena found herself sharing more of her thoughts and fears with David. She told him about her past relationships, about why she had built walls around her heart, about her fear that love meant losing herself. David's response surprised her. Instead of trying to convince her that her fears were wrong, he listened and understood. "I get why you feel that way," he said one evening, as they sat on the beach watching the sunset. "I've seen what happens when people lose themselves in relationships, but I've also seen what happens when 2 people support each other's dreams. Instead of competing with them." "What do you mean?" Elena asked. "Well, look at my parents," David said. "My mom is a teacher, and my dad is a mechanic. They've been married for 30 years, and neither one ever asked the other to give up what they loved. My dad goes to every school play my mom directs. Mom knows more about car engines than most people because she listens when my dad talks. About his work, they made each other stronger, not weaker. Alina had never thought about relationships that way. All the examples she had seen growing up involved one person sacrificing for the other. Usually the woman giving up her dreams for her partner's career. I've never seen a relationship like that, Alina admitted. Neither had I, until I met you, David said quietly. Alina looked at him in surprise. What do you mean? David turned to face her fully. Alina, watching you work, seeing how passionate you are about helping animals, it's how dedicated you are to your clinic, it makes me want to be better at what I do. When you talk about a difficult case, I find myself thinking of ways I could help. Not by trying to solve your problems for you, but by supporting you while you solve them yourself. Alina felt her heart racing. This was the moment she had been both hoping for and dreading. David was telling her he had feelings for her, but he was doing it in a way that honored her independence rather than threatening it. David, she said, carefully, I care about you too, but I'm scared. What if this changes everything? What if I lose myself? David reached over and gently took her hand. Alina, I fell in love with who you are right now. Your independence, your passion, your strength, that's what drew me to you. Why would I want to change any of that? For the first time in years, Alina allowed herself to imagine what love might look like if it didn't require her to become someone else. What if David was right? What if the right person could make her stronger instead of weaker? That night, as Alina walked home from the beach, she realized that her feelings for David had grown beyond friendship. She was falling in love with this gentle soldier who rescued stray dogs and listened to her fears without judgment. The thought terrified and thrilled her at the same time. For the first time since she was a teenager, Alina went to sleep thinking not about protecting her heart, but about the possibility of sharing it with someone who might actually deserve it. 2 years later, Alina stood in front of her bedroom mirror, adjusting the simple white dress she had chosen for her wedding day. She had never imagined she would be getting married, especially not in the way she was about to. This wasn't the big church wedding her grandmother had always dreamed of for her, but it was perfect for who she had become. The ceremony was taking place at the animal sanctuary that she and David had built together over the past year. What started as a conversation about helping more animals had grown into something bigger than either of them had imagined. The sanctuary sat on 10 acres just outside Pine Harbor, with space for rescue animals, a rehabilitation center, and even a small clinic for low-income families who couldn't afford veterinary care. Alina smiled as she thought about how the sanctuary had come to be. It was David's idea, actually. He had been working with a program that helped veterans transition to civilian careers, and many of the men and women he counseled found peace in working with animals. David suggested they create a place where rescue animals and struggling veterans could help heal each other. It makes perfect sense, David had said one evening as they walked through what was then just an empty field. Animals don't judge. They don't care about your past or your scars. They just respond to kindness. And veterans who are having trouble connecting with people often find it easier to start with animals. Alina had fallen in love with the idea immediately. She could continue her veterinary work while expanding it to help even more animals and people. David could use his counseling training to work with veterans while also learning about animal care. Together, they could create something that combined both of their passions. The project had taken months of planning, fundraising, and hard work. Alina had worried that working so closely together might strain their relationship, but the opposite had happened. Watching David interact with the animals, seeing his patience with veterans who were struggling, had only made her love him more. And David often told her that watching her passion for helping animals had inspired him to work harder at his own goals. Now, looking around at the sanctuary they had built together, Alina felt proud of what they had accomplished. The main building housed Alina's clinic and David's office. There were separate areas for dogs, cats, and farm animals, all designed with comfort and healing in mind. The gardens that surrounded the buildings were David's contribution. He had discovered a love for growing things during his therapy sessions and had created beautiful spaces where both animals and people could find peace. A knock on the door interrupted Elena's thoughts. "Come in," she called. Her grandmother Rosa entered, carrying a small bouquet of wildflowers. At 75, Rosa was still beautiful, with silver hair and bright eyes that missed nothing. She had been skeptical about Elena's choice to marry. A soldier she had only known for 2 years, but David had won her over completely during their first meeting. "You look beautiful, Mia," Rosa said, handing Elena the flowers. "These are from your grandfather's garden. I thought you might want to carry something from him today." Elena felt tears spring to her eyes. Her grandfather had passed away when she was 15, but she still remembered how much he had loved her grandmother. How gentle he had been with everyone around him. "Thank you, Grandma. That means everything to me." Rosa sat down on Elena's bed and patted the space beside her. "Sit with me for a minute. I want to talk to you before the ceremony." Elena sat down, careful not to wrinkle her dress. "What is it?" "I owe you an apology," Rosa said quietly. "For years, I pushed you to get married because I thought that was what would make you happy. I didn't understand that you needed to find the right person, not just any person." Elena took her grandmother's hand. "You don't need to apologize, Grandma. You wanted me to be happy." "Yes, but I was thinking about happiness the old way," Rosa said. "I thought marriage meant finding someone to take care of you. Watching you and David together, I see something different. You take care of each other, but you also take care of yourselves. You're both stronger together, but you're also strong apart." Elena felt a warm feeling spread through her chest. This was exactly what she had discovered about love with David. It wasn't about becoming dependent on someone else, but about choosing to share your independent life with someone who made it better. "David is a good man," Rosa continued. "But more than that, he's the right man for you. He doesn't try to change you or make you smaller. He celebrates who you are." Elena nodded, thinking about all the ways David had supported her dreams over. The past 2 years, when she had wanted to expand her clinic, he had helped her write grant applications. When she had doubted whether she could handle the sanctuary project, he had reminded her of all the animals she had already saved. When she had bad days at work, he listened without trying to fix everything for her. "I'm ready," Elena said, standing up and smoothing her dress. The ceremony took place in the main garden of the sanctuary, surrounded by the people and animals that mattered most to them. David's military friends stood beside Elena's veterinary colleagues. Several of the veterans David worked with had come, some bringing the therapy animals they had adopted from the sanctuary. Even some of Elena's 4-legged patients were in attendance. Wearing flower crowns that David had insisted on making, Elena's friend Lisa, who had reconnected with Elena after her own divorce, served as maid of honor. "I'm so happy you found this," Lisa whispered as they waited for the ceremony to begin. "You and David are proof that the right kind of love makes you more yourself, not less." David stood at the altar wearing his dress military uniform, looking handsome and nervous. Esperanza sat beside him wearing a bow tie, officially serving as the best dog. When Elena walked down the aisle, David's face lit up with such pure joy that several people in the audience started crying. The vows they had written were simple but powerful. Elena promised to support David's dreams while pursuing her own. Promised to love Elena's independence while offering his partnership. They both promised to continue growing as individuals while building something beautiful together. When the officiant pronounced them married, the celebration was unlike anything Elena had ever imagined. Children played with puppies in the grass, while adults shared stories about the animals that had changed their lives. Veterans talked with veterinary students about the healing power of animal companionship. The whole event felt like a celebration, not just of Elena and David's love, but of the community they had built together. As the sun set over the sanctuary, Elena and David stood together watching their guests mingle with the animals. Esperanza was playing with a group of children while several cats napped in the warm evening light. "No regrets?" David asked, slipping his arm around Elena's waist. Elena leaned into him, feeling perfectly content. "None at all. Oh, this is better than anything I ever imagined for myself." She had spent so many years afraid that love would make her lose herself. But instead, she had found that the right love had helped her become more fully who she was meant to be. The sanctuary was proof of what they could accomplish together, something neither of them could have created alone. That night, Elena and David walked through their sanctuary one last time before heading home. Elena reflected on how wrong Her assumptions about marriage had been, she had thought it meant giving up her independence, but instead she had found a partnership that made her stronger. She had feared becoming less than herself, but with David, she had become more than she ever dreamed possible. The girl who had once dreaded the idea of marriage was now a woman who couldn't imagine her life without the love she had found in the most unexpected place, with a soldier who had taught her that the right kind of love didn't diminish you. It helped you shine brighter than ever before.